To start tonight, just in case anybody forgot, I'm Ellen Mejia Hooper. I'm the Director of Facilities Planning and Construction. I'm being assisted this evening by Tim Haley. And our sole goal tonight is to look over this criteria and the proposed metrics and find out if any of these items would like to be adjusted. You'll notice that some of the metric have been highlighted in yellow, and that is because they were metrics that we've used previously in the 2016 master plan. And so we maintained the ID on the left, just so people could keep track of how we've kind of gotten to where we are. So as you can see, some of the IDs have multiple letters to it, but that's because there were things that were combined together. Once this meeting is over, however, we will drop those IDs off just because they're confusing and people will wonder what happened to all the other letters and why are they out of order. One of the things we did want to bring up tonight to the committee in particular was F, P, and Q. So when looking at trying to establish metrics for the line item F and the line item P and Q, came up with something that was relatively the same as a metric. So a place that I was hoping to start the discussion this evening is kind of around those two criteria. And if we miss the boat and there's some other way we should be looking at these two so that we have a more distinct criteria for each one of them, or B, should these two be combined together? So that's kind of open for discussion if any of the committee members have an opinion, or we can leave it as is. It's just that they are very similar metrics.
I have my hand up.
Okay. Oh, yes, you do. Sorry. I need to move that little box so that it's in a different spot. Okay, go for it, Don.
Thank you. I need some clarification before I get into my opinions. What is considered temporary housing? I mean, as opposed to a portable?
So we do have some schools that either right now are, so for example, like Ohlone or Valley View. So Ohlone has kindergarten classrooms that never got built as part of the rebuild. It was part of a later phase that did not get completed. So the kindergarten rooms are in portables that are considered temporary because there is a scheduled plan for them to go into a new building. Same thing with Valley View. Valley View right now is in temporary housing because we demolished the original campus, but have not built the next phase. Then there's this gray area also of Kennedy and Steege, where the critical needs project that has not been completed yet, but is scheduled to be completed shortly, would put them into temporary housing, which would again be portables, before moving into another place. The only time that this was not portables is kind of becoming untrue because the Mandarin school at one point really didn't have a home and was in a temporary facility. Even though it was a fully built building, it wasn't large enough to hold their whole capacity. But after the board meeting, I can't remember if it was last week or a few weeks ago, they're all sort of blending together, but they now have a permanent home, or at least that was the basic direction given by the board at Pinole Middle. So that was the only one that didn't have that, their temporary housing wasn't technically portables.
Okay, now, again, I need help on clarification. What is the difference between the portables at Valley View, for instance, as opposed to the portable style classrooms where half of Hercules Middle High School?
So again,
I'm sorry, if you're,
Yeah.
if you're looking at the physical building itself, not the designation. I mean, that's semantics, but if the physical building itself, tell me what's the difference?
So Hercules has 3 versions of buildings. They have one, which is like the regular constructed stick-built building, right? They have a second type, which we normally refer to as modular, and that is the quote unquote relocatable building that was built when the state required us to have relocatable buildings as 30% of our classroom capacity. Now, those have a permanent foundation. They're not sitting on wood. They also have exterior finishes that are more durable than the T11 siding. And then another chunk of their buildings are what we would consider true portables, which are sitting on wood foundations. So they're still on their sleds and they could be technically picked up and moved.
Okay, the modulars, could they be
Yes.
picked up and moved?
Yes, but it's more complicated. It's
Yeah,
not as easy.
understood, but it's my point here is I'm really not seeing a true difference between those kind of modular classrooms and the portables. They are not permanent. I mean, nailed down to the ground kind of things. And that, to me, that makes it difficult to distinguish between some of our schools as far as the condition of them.
Well, and we could count the modulars as portables, and that's not necessarily
But
untrue.
I have a
So,
question.
yes.
Were those Hercules modular or portables meant to be temporary, or were they meant to be permanent structures?
See, this is where the hard part comes in. So
When they were built, were they
back
meant
in the
to be,
day,
were they meant to be permanent?
right, back in the day, the state required, when we had matching funds using state money, that 30% of our classroom capacity had to be relocatable.
But in Valley View, they're temporary.
The Valley View ones were are considered temporary, yes.
Because there should be a building coming for it. So I guess I'm trying to clarify the point that the Hercules portables were never meant to be temporary.
Well, a chunk of them weren't. So they have 3 groups of buildings, right? So a chunk of them definitely weren't, because they're full-fledged portables. They were not meant to be permanent. The relocatable ones that were built during the original construction, even though the state required them to be relocatable, the idea was that they were permanent buildings on the site.
So they're not there in lieu of some other construction up and coming. They were there as classrooms. But I'm trying to clarify.
I mean, obviously I wasn't here at the time, so I can't say that 100% sure.
So the state looks at it from a standpoint that the modular structures are at grade level typically and on a foundation, where the portable structures or the ones like at Valley View are not on permanent foundations and can be moved easier and typically are not at grade level.
If I could weigh in again, I'm looking at item F where it says schools using temporary housing. I mean, I have to look at those modular buildings at Hercules, the modular buildings at Chavez, and a few other schools. And in my opinion, those are clearly temporary because they were never meant to be permanent. Well, they may have been meant to be permanent, but not in the
Chavez are not permanent. Chavez are not modulars. They are regular portables.
Okay.
It's same as Fairmont, same with Highland, same with Stige, same with you know, all of those are regular. The only place that has these modular buildings is Hercules.
Okay,
And they're on permanent foundations and at grade level. So what the state did back then was to say that, you know, you're going to build these schools and we want you to do these modulars so that we reduce the costs overall of the construction so that we can afford to build more throughout the state because we have such a large increase in population going on that we need to do this. And so they looked at them as permanent modular structures, and they're not temporary. They are considered permanent from the state standpoint.
yes. Now go ask the people in Hercules if they agree with that.
Yeah, well, I totally understand that, but
But I think we're kind of going sideways here. So what we need to really concentrate on, and whether the, you know, the Hercules modulars, which again is only a subset of their overall classroom count. And you know, we can decide one way or another whether those are temporary or not. But what we really need to be focused on is right now, F, P, and Q have two different, I mean, they're right now two different criteria. But how to measure them kind of seems like they're the same. So what we're trying to figure out is if there was intent for those from the committee for them to be different, and if so, how, so that we can either change the metrics so that they're more distinct or combine them together.
I don't
Can I-
want, sorry, my apologies. When, as this progresses, I do not want the good people of Hercules to be pushed to a lower level because somebody has decided that those temporary buildings are more permanent than they all might think. Because the state, poor boy, the distribution of the funds and their requirements. Yeah, I don't want to have a beautiful El Cerrito High School and De Anza High School and Pinole Valley High School, and then have Hercules, the people of Hercules, the students of Hercules, still attending classes in temporary facilities. I just want to keep that in mind as we move forward and bring things to the board. And I'll shut up on that one.
Okay, and I heard another voice come up.
I was gonna just ask
Yes.
something. Danielle here. I was temporary housing was that conversation about I think the Mandarin school. It was in like a different building, not even a district building or something. That's what
So I'm not sure if it's just me, but I'm having
that's how I
tough time
understood temporary.
No, I couldn't hear her either. About one word in 10.
Really? Uh-oh, that's too bad.
You might want to consider
Let me try.
calling in, or you're clearer now. Maybe just try it again.
Okay. I was just saying that I thought one of the things that I remember about the temporary was I thought the Mandarin school, which was in like not even a district building, it was using some other temporary housing. It wasn't even district owned or something. Did I understand that or no?
No, the Mandarin is in a district facility. It's at Sarah School, which is it used to be the adult school, but it is definitely a district building.
Oh, but temporary meaning like it's not meant to be a permanent school. Is that like that?
Yes. So
is that one of the temporary ones that we're talking about, Ben?
That was one. So Sarah School does not have very many classrooms, so it was not going to be able to accommodate the full program as they grew to be. They're growing one grade level each year, so they wouldn't be able to fit totally in that building. However, and I believe it was the last board meeting, the board had given indication, basically unanimously, that they were in favor of moving Mandarin to Pinole Middle, which was going to be a permanent location for that program. So that particular instance has now actually kind of fallen off the table.
Right. So I guess I'm just thinking maybe this one isn't relevant if everything can be combined under portables, beside, like, if that's no longer an issue, really.
Okay. Any other committee members have a thought on that comment? Either for or against?
I think it needs to stay as separate items.
So how would you designate between what, like, if you read the proposed metrics, do you agree with the proposed metrics then, Dawn? Or what do you see as the difference between the two criteria that we're measuring?
I'm rereading it. Okay. I don't know, I would feel better if there was a better clarification of you know, what is considered interim and temporary. As I mean, like, for instance, Valley View, how long is that supposed to be a temporary campus? I mean, I looked at the a lot of the buildings that we tore down at the old Wilson Elementary. They sure looked like they came from the same place as Valley View's classrooms did, and they'd been there for decades.
Isn't Valley View considered a temporary campus? Can you clarify that for us? What part of Valley View is temporary at this point?
Basically, the entire campus is temporary at this point. We demolished all of the permanent buildings on that side.
Okay. So Valley View completely meets both criteria for temporary housing. Is that a true statement?
I believe so, yes. Like I said, Ohlone has a few classrooms that are in temporary facilities that are portables. The question is, like, does temporary just mean the fact that there is a future phase planned to build a new building for that? But which school is that not true for? Every place that we have portables, the entire thought is that those portables are not supposed to be there forever, and those portables should be replaced by a real building. So that any place that you have portables is technically a temporary location or a temporary housing. And so it's difficult to really tease out the difference between what temporary really means. And so that's kind of the stumbling block. Are we really just counting the portables as the temporary housing? And is that true across the board? Or is there some designation of some portables that are more temporary than others? And physically, there's not a difference between them.
In my opinion, I think the difference between F and then P and Q is F is looking at schools more like Valley View, where the majority or all of the campus is portables, whereas P and Q is looking at schools where a much smaller percentage is portables, where there are actually permanent buildings, or more permanent, I should say. And I just think that there should be a distinction between those when you're comparing the schools.
So
Wouldn't you just count, the schools, if it's all portables, then it would just get more points towards getting rebuilt sooner because it's got more portables? I mean, and it also, like, P and Q says portables and temporary facilities, like it already includes that term in there. So if you just wrote P and Q and F, Seems like it would cover that, but
Well, again, correct me if I'm mistaken, but Valley View is the only school that is 100% portable and temporary. Am I correct?
Yes,
Okay. So every other school is just a varying degrees of portableness.
yes, varying degrees of portableness.
So what is your wording recommendation, Mr. Gosney?
I would still like to see the left as separate, but it's not something to go to war on, or I won't even lose any sleep on it tonight if you combine them. I mean,
So-
as I said, if I had my druthers, I'd rather it to be separate.
So, Ellen, I dare to toss out something, but what if you changed P and Q and took out the word temporary and just called it portables and leave the F there as temporary? And then in the criteria or in the metric, you take out the word temporary in the metric of P and Q, but you put it into the F.
That is doable. The question that I still have that, you know, I would not be able to define to anyone and post this committee, I have to try to represent the intent of this committee. So I'd like it to be clear is how would we grade a temporary place versus a portable?
So it sounds like we have to take the word temporary out of P and Q.
Mhm. But even for grading F, what would I consider a temporary location?
Well, what's the percentage of temporary meant to be temporary buildings? Valley View is 100% meant to be temporary. Which schools have a kindergarten that's meant temporary, and what percentage would that be?
Okay, so it would be schools that have that we demolished a building but hadn't rebuilt a new building yet. And that's what temporary is considered.
But that's what the definition says, percentage of classrooms which are interim.
Right, and that's what I'm just trying to figure out is what interim looks like compared to a portable, because like Don said, basically all portables were never meant to be portables were never meant to be a permanent solution, no matter where they are. So I was trying to tease out that definition of interim or temporary and what that is versus the portables. So that's what I was trying to get to. Does that help at all? Maybe not. So it sounds like it's places where we have demolished a building and have not yet built the new building to put the people in. So those portables that are being used in that specific use versus all the other portables across the district.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
If you demolish the building for whatever reason and you put a portable there meanwhile as a placeholder. If it was
Okay.
originally designed with portables, then that's a completely different category.
So how many schools fall into that category though? I mean, Valley View is one, but what are the schools?
Well, then you get to the next question. We have that is the plan for both Kennedy and Stige, even though it has not exactly occurred yet, but it's supposed to occur within the next 6 months. So do those ones count? Because those are totally funded projects. They have budgets allotted to them by the board. They are in the works. So if we count those, then we've added to the list. Otherwise, we only have 2. When we're done, we'll only have 4.
Sorry, 2, Valley View, and what is the second?
Aloni.
Okay,
So this is proposed construction that already has a building attached to it.
That's well, I mean, it had the plan that buildings were demolished and folks were put into portables on the understanding that someday there would be a new building.
I don't feel comfortable including future demolition and construction into this until something is more concrete. I mean, what Kennedy High and Stige are the two examples there.
So I don't think they should be considered because their buildings already planned and funded. Is that a true statement?
They're already, the critical needs project is already funded by the board to have their buildings demolished and for them to move into portables. The only reason Kennedy hasn't happened yet is because they're, thank you so much, Simone. I hope I pronounced your name right. The only reason they haven't been done yet is because Caliber is still occupying the portables. Well, one of the reasons why it hasn't been done yet is because Caliber is still occupying those portables. But they're slated to move out as soon as the state grants Caliber the money. So it's all in, there's dominoes in place. It just hasn't occurred yet.
All right, sorry, since that was brought up, I mean, we know that you know, the district is planning to reuse the elementary school, the temporary elementary school that Caliber is in for the 3 times the number of students for the high school. But you know, Caliber really hasn't progressed very far on their construction, have they? So I mean,
they have plans. The difficulty is that all it needs is the bond sale. So they are on the funded, they are on the list to get the next issuance of the statewide bond.
I understand that, but that does not really equate to construction workers out there building the new facility yet. That's, I mean,
They
so
already have DSA approval. I mean, the moment that money comes through, they can start construction.
yes, and again, my point though is it's going to take a fair amount of time before that building is ready to be occupied. 6 months, 9 months, a year?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not really talking about vacating the temporary campus to be able to move if we start a school again. Vacating the temporary campus to bring the Kennedy High students to that temporary campus for quite a long time.
Right, although we are totally veering off. So, and I apologize because I've not helped. But we need to make sure we stay focused on the ideas, right? So the idea is if you're currently in temporary housing, you should be prioritized before those who are not in temporary housing. And we should not combine that with the portables. But I think we've heard from other community or committee members that potentially we should combine it. So I think we should go ahead and have a vote on whether we should combine these two or not. And then if we're not combining it, I think we have a clear direction about what we're going to classify as temporary and what we're not, what is just plainly portables. So if we keep them separate, we will have F be totally just temporary housing and P and Q will be just portables. Right? So we can either combine F and P together or
I think they have to be separate. If we make an motion, I would motion to keep it separate, where F is temporary housing and P and Q is campuses with the portable on it.
I will second that.
okay. So let me finish writing this up. F is temporary housing and P and Q is portables. So can have a yes and we can have a no. And we can Launch, save. Okay. How do I launch? Ah, here we go. Sorry, it's been a month. All right. I didn't push the little checkbox. Relaunch poll, allow panelists to vote. Okay, there we go. Now everybody should be able to,
we should have 10 votes.
should be able to vote.
It says we can't vote.
Somebody can't vote there, Ellen.
It says
I'm not sure. We've had 7 people vote, so it seems, I don't know why. And considering we only have 3 left, all 7 voted for yes. Actually, now we have 8 voted for yes. So now we have 10 that voted for yes. So I think either way, we would end up with a majority that is looking for F to be purely temporary housing and P and Q to be purely portables. So I'm sorry, I'm not sure why you weren't able to vote, but I'm afraid the vote wouldn't have swayed the outcome. So that's the decision on that one. So is there any other items on here besides that one? I mean, those were the 2 that I was least clear about. Are there any other ones on here that either people are unclear or do not like the metric that was selected to go along with them, or have any other comments that things are misrepresented from our previous discussions?
Sorry, I was muted. I have a problem on the seismic needs.
Okay.
I know that a lot of people are using a seismic report that is, what, 17, 18 years old, that pretty much says that 75% of the buildings in West Contra Costa County do not meet the seismic needs. And we're throwing this up on a regular basis as justification for relocating students, for tearing down schools and such. This was used to relocate the Wilson kids 2 years ahead of schedule. Yeah, saying that the school is unsafe for them because it doesn't meet the seismic requirements, even though, like I said, 75% of the buildings around West County didn't meet the seismic requirements. I want to make sure that we don't use the seismic needs as a panacea and a reason for doing work on our schools when we need to look at the risk associated with the seismic needs more carefully. Considering that the students are only in those classrooms maybe 20 to 23 hours per week out of the 156 hours in the week. And you got to ask the question, what is the actual risk of the catastrophic earthquake happening during those 23 hours per week? And does it justify the expense of tearing down an entire school or relocating students at $800,000 a year for busing? What now? Go ahead.
So my question would be, is there some kind of meter out there that can tell you when that earthquake's going to happen within that 23-hour period that they're in school during the week? I mean, it's the I mean, it's the $24 question is how do you say that a seismic event's going to happen when school is not occupied?
And I agree with you on that. Again, that's a risk that you have to evaluate. What are the chances that it might happen? I mean, it's like here in the Bay Area, we all the time we're talking about property development. We have to look at the 100-year tsunami and the 500-year tsunami. They say, well, 500-year tsunami, I mean, what are the chances that it's going to happen today? Well, the last one was 499 years ago. So the risk may be a little bit higher than that. I mean, I'm saying we need to take a look at this and weigh it against the cost associated, because you can say that almost every old school that we've got in our district does not meet the seismic standards and needs to be torn down today. We cannot put our kids at risk. We've got to move them out of those schools. Well, at what cost? We don't have the money to rebuild all the schools based on that kind of a criteria. So I'm just saying we need to do a cost benefit analysis or risk analysis.
So the thing is, we can't necessarily go down that road at this point in time. But what we do need to decide is whether the seismic needs wants to be a criteria or not. So the question, Don, are you proposing that we remove this as one of the metrics?
I'm not. I mean, what we're deciding today will also weigh in once we start weighing how much of an importance this has to do. And I just want to make sure that I get it out there right now that we should not use seismic needs as, we got some people in our district, whether they're staff or whether they're board members, that wants to use this as a reason why we should tear down schools and build brand new ones by itself. And I want to make sure that we give it its proper weight.
So Ellen, within that seismic report, and you're right, I mean, we kind of have to take an analysis of it. And I think that the seismic report analyzes it, and it does say priority, because there is priorities established within the seismic report. So I think that as we get to the weighting of this and taking a look at it, then you can do that risk analysis that goes along with it. And I think that the seismic report gives you some of that information that you can do that risk analysis.
There definitely are levels within the seismic report.
Yeah.
Not all hazards are the same, and that's actually how we get the grade differential, the point differential on that particular item. Is not all items within the report are deemed as unsafe as others. So the more unsafe the building, the higher the points it gets, just from not weighting it, but just from the scale of 1 to 10 that's applied to all of these criteria. But if we're not proposing to remove it and we're okay with that as the metric, understanding that maybe in the weighting it sits in a different place, do we have any proposed changes or clarifications that we need to make? And I lost my thing. It tells me people raise their hands.
I don't see any hands going up.
No hands going up.
I'll put my hand up.
Okay, Don.
All right. So you like hands now. I'm not proposing that we change it, but item V and X, I just want to go on record. I see this as discrimination. I say this all the time. Let's swap words. Instead of saying black and brown youth, let's say white youth. Let's say Asian youth. If we did that, people would jump up and down saying that is discriminating against people based on the color of their skin. And I just don't believe that we should be doing that. I don't believe that we should, I don't believe the people of the white and Asian people of Kensington, more affluent community, should be given a higher priority based on the color of their skin or the fact that their parents are wealthier. I believe that everybody should be treated the same. This is what equal rights actually means. And I'm seeing this as discriminating against people that are not Black and brown. And I've just seen too much of that over the years, and people want to justify it as saying, well, we've been putting them down for too long. And I agree with that, but I just don't believe in discrimination. And I see that that's what this is. And again, I've gone on record, and now that I move on.
Does anybody else have a proposed change to the criteria? Seeing none, do I have anybody who would make a motion that this is the proposed criteria and metrics that we move forward with and show to the facilities committee?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I should have been more prepared with a new poll. So let me create a new one here, and then we will vote, and then we'll be out of here early.
So the next step after this vote is then giving weight to each of the categories.
Yes, so because we have a new board and we have a new facilities committee, what we would like to do is take these forward to them. The game plan, quite a few of these are new, and so we did not ask about quite a few of the criteria here are new and the metrics. So what we would like to do is go forward and get additional community input, whether through community meetings or a survey or both, to see how people would rank these most important to least important. And then bring that back to this committee so that you guys have a little bit more of a read of what the broader community believes is most important to least important. And then that will give you some level of input to be able to make the final recommendation to the board on the weighting. So that's our plan. However, we are going to present that plan to the facilities committee, which happens to be on February 12th. If anybody in this committee would like to attend, we would, of course, encourage that. But if the facilities committee agrees with our approach, then we will move forward with that. But yes, we need to weight these, and that is the next step. We just felt it's important to be able to involve the broader community as often as possible. So I'm launching the next poll.
I'm going to make a request that when you send out survey for people to rank these, that you specifically send an email to the committee members so that we see it and we know about it before the deadline. I missed out on earlier surveys because I just wasn't paying enough attention to generic notifications.
Not a problem.
Thank
And
you.
actually, we would love the committee's support in getting the word out. So when we send that out, if you send it to your friends, family, coworkers, classmates, etc., that would be fantastic, because we're looking for as much participation as possible.
I remind you, I own an online newspaper with a reach of about 15,000 people
Right.
here in Richmond. So
And that works too.
Yeah.
I was just trying to include all of our committee members,
Yes.
even those that don't have a newspaper. But we will welcome any participation. All right. So we have 8 in, which, let's see. Got a couple, maybe a couple more. We definitely have a majority who have voted yes. So if we end the poll, share the results. We have all 8 responding as yes. We have additional folks on, but I know Ms. Cooper sent me an email saying she was on the phone and unable to vote. So we might have a couple others that are in that same boat. But we
Actually did
definitely
vote.
have a majority. Oh, you were able to vote? Okay,
Yes.
great. Awesome. Well, thank you for being able to join us.
Yes, thank you.
So, but we do have a majority of those attending who have voted yes. So we will move this forward with the corrections made on F, P, and Q, and send that on to the facilities committee. Again, that meeting, I believe, is from 3 to 5 on the 12th, but you can find it on the facility page. Oh, and another yes. Excellent. Thank you. So that way, if you would like to attend, that would be awesome. If not, we will be presenting this as part of the agenda during that meeting. And we will be back to you with the decision on what the facilities committee, if they approve our path forward, then we will get either the meetings or the survey out and make sure you guys are all aware of it. We again really appreciate your time and your efforts on this committee. We cannot do this without you, and really appreciate you taking your time to spend your evening with us. So unless there's any other closing comments from the group, I will say farewell for now, and please stay safe, wear your masks, and we'll see you later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to meet you all.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.